Ozymandias by Percy by Shelley. Read by Studio of All Trades. I met a traveller from an antique land, who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
Hey y'all, this is Studio of All Trades here. As you know, today we are talking about Ozymandias by Percy by Shelley. So let's move on to an interpretation. We'll start with a reading in simple English, so you get the gist of the story, and then we'll check out a couple of ways of looking deeper into the poem. In simple English, the story kind of goes: I met a guy who traveled. He told me about a crumbling statue of an old ruler. The sculptor did a great job showing how harsh this guy was. The words on the statue told all the other kings they weren't as good as him, and the statue was wasting away in the desert. So the poem is interesting in the way that it explores voice and speakers. A lot of poems you read have 1, maybe 2 speakers, but not Ozymandias. The poem technically has 4 voices, but each voice is encased within the words of another speaker. It's similar to like a Russian nesting doll. The first speaker is the narrator, possibly the poet Shelley himself, as evidenced at the beginning when the poet writes, I met a traveler. The narrator goes on to quote the traveler, which is the second layer of the nesting doll, and this is evidenced by the statement of who said, and then the quote in line 2. Within the story told by the traveler and quoted by the narrator, the traveler observes the statue and finds that the sculptor was very intentional in the portrayal of certain traits and features, stating, its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survived, stamped on these lifeless things, making up a third voice in the poem in lines 6 and 7. Within the words chiseled by the sculptor, we find the fourth and final voice of the poem, and the innermost layer of the nesting doll. The great ruler who commissioned the statue has the sculptor write his words in lines 10 and 11, saying, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. There are a few ways to look at why this is significant, but I think it's relevant because it shows how word of mouth, or the oration of stories and information, transcends the boundaries of the human lifespan, transcends the boundaries of time. Words live forever if they are passed on forever. This is especially relevant based on the next point, which is sort of like, what is this poem trying to tell us? What is Percy by Shelley trying to tell us? What we're going to look at here is irony. I really need to get a better stand for my camera. What we're looking at here is irony. So as a refresher, irony is when the state of something is contrary to expectation, and that's usually deliberate. In this case, it's like, what is Shelley deliberately making contrary to what you expect? So it's like, where do we see irony here? A massive statue of a great ruler isn't ironic. Why wouldn't a great ruler want a massive statue? But what's ironic is that the massive statue is crumbling. It is in a state of disrepair. This comes back to this concept that we talked about with the voices of like lasting through time. The words and image of the great leader lasted through time, but not in the way that the great leader expected it to, and not in the way that one reading the poem might expect the image of a great leader to last through time. So this, like, the crumbling status of this statue tells us that the power and influence that he once held disappeared to the degree that either no one took care of the statue, or what I think is much more likely is that the rulers, the rulers that were in opposition to him, he says, ye mighty and despair. So he's referencing the mighty other than himself, which is probably other rulers, kings, his opponents. And based on the fact that the statue's head is cut off, it tells us that the statue's head is laying in the sand, right? I think that that's the more likely one, is that someone dismantled it. And I think that this second possibility, that someone dismantled it rather than just time putting it into disrepair, is probably the more likely one, also because it shows even more irony. The words on the statue tell the ruler's opponents to despair, as I said, and he's now crumbling. It's more irony. So what does that tell us? What is Percy by Shelley trying to tell us? It tells us that vanity, power, and influence, they can all easily be lost to the winds of time and the shifting of political powers. Lost to the point that it can even make a pitiful fool out of those who think that their glory has no end. Stories and words, however, can last forever. Thank you for watching.